Chapter 8. Two more golden tickets found. That evening, Mr. Bucket's newspaper announced the finding of not only the third golden ticket, but the fourth as well. 2 golden tickets found today, screamed the headlines. Only one more left. All right, said Grandpa Joe when the whole family was gathered in the old people's room after supper. Let's hear who found them. The third ticket, read Mr. Bucket, holding the newspaper up close to his face because his eyes were bad and he couldn't afford glasses. The third ticket was found by Miss Violet Beauregard. There was great excitement in the Beauregard household when our reporter arrived to interview the lucky young lady. Cameras were clicking and flashbulbs were flashing, and people were pushing and jostling and trying to get a bit closer to the famous girl. And the famous girl was standing on the chair in the living room, waving the golden ticket madly at her at arm's length as though she were flagging a taxi. She was talking very fast and very loudly to everyone, but it was not easy to hear all that she had to say because she was chewing so ferociously on a piece of gum at the same time. I'm a gum chewer normally, she shouted, but when I heard about these ticket things of Mr. Wonka's, I laid off the gum and switched to candy bars in the hope of striking lucky. Now, of course, I'm right back on the gum. I just adore gum. I can't do without it. I munch on it all day long, except for a few minutes at meal times when I take it out and stick it behind my ear for safekeeping. To tell you the honest truth, I simply wouldn't feel comfortable if I didn't have a little wedge of gum between to chew on every moment of every day. I really wouldn't. My mother says it's not ladylike and it looks ugly to see girls' jaws going up and down like mine do all the time, but I don't agree. And who's she to criticize anyway? Because if you ask me, I'd say that her jaws were going up and down almost as much as mine are for yelling at me every minute of every day. Now, Violet, Mrs. Beauregard said from the far corner of the room, and she was standing on the piano to avoid being trampled on by the mob. All right, Mother, keep your hair on, said Violet. And now she went on, turning to the reporters again. It may interest you to know that this piece of gum I've been chewing right at this moment is the one I've been working on for over 3 months solid. That's a record, that is. I've beaten the record held by my best friend, Miss Cornelia Prizzle and was she mad? It was my most treasured possession. Now, this piece of gum is. At nights, I just stick it on the end of the bedpost, and it's as good as ever in the morning. A bit hard at first, maybe, but as soon as it softens up again, after I've given it a few good chews, before I started chewing on the world record, I used to change my piece of gum every day. I used to do it in the elevator on the way home from school. Why the elevator? Because I like sticking the gooey piece I had just finished onto one of the elevator buttons. Then the next person he came along and pressed the button got my old gum on the end of his finger. Ha ha! What a racket they kicked up, some of them. You get the best results with the women who got the expensive gloves on. Oh, yes, I'm thrilled to be going to Mr. Wonka's factory, and I understand that afterwards he's going to give me enough gum to last me the whole rest of my life. Whoopee, hooray! Beastly girl, said Grandma Josephine. Despicable, said Grandma Georgia. She'll come to the sticky end one day, chewing all that gum, you see, if she doesn't. And who got the fourth golden ticket, Daddy? Charlie asked. Now let me see, said Mr. Bucket, peering at the newspaper again. Ah, yes, here we are. The fourth golden ticket, he read, was found by a boy called Mike Teavee. Another bad lot, I'll be bound, muttered Grandma Josephine. Don't interrupt, Grandma, said Mrs. Bucket. The Teavee household, said Mr. Bucket, going on with his reading, was crammed like all the others with excited visitors when our reporter arrived. But young Mike Teavee, the lucky winner, seemed extremely annoyed by the whole business. Can't you fools see I'm watching TV? He had said angrily. I wish you wouldn't interrupt. The 9-year-old boy was seated before an enormous television set, with his eyes glued to the screen, and he was watching a film in which one bunch of gangsters was shooting up another bunch of gangsters with machine guns. Mike Teavee himself had no less than 18 toy pistols of various sizes hanging from the belts around his body, and every now and then he would leap into the air and fire off half a dozen rounds from one or the other of these weapons. Quiet, he shouted when someone tried to ask him a question. Didn't I tell you not to interrupt? This show was an absolute whiz-banger. It's terrific. I watch it every day. I watch all of them every day, even the crummy ones where there's no shooting. I like the gangsters the best. They're terrific, those gangsters, especially when they start pumping each other full of lead or flashing old stilettos or giving each other 1, 2, 3 with their knuckle dusters. Oh boy, what wouldn't I give to be doing it myself? It's the life, I tell you. It's terrific. That's quite enough, snapped Grandma Josephine. I can't bear to listen to it. Hi. Nor me, said Grandma Georgina. Do all children behave like this nowadays? Like these brats we've been hearing about? She was not happy. Of course not, said Mr. Bucket, smiling at the old lady in bed. Some do, of course. In fact, quite a lot of them do, but not all. And now there's only one ticket left, said Grandpa George. Quite so, sniffed Grandma Georgina. And just as to be sure, as I'll be having cabbage soup for supper tomorrow, that ticket will go to some nasty little beast who doesn't deserve it. These are some naughty children, huh, Nolan? Should we read chapter 9? Grandpa Joe takes a gamble. The next day, when Charlie got home from school and went to see his grandparents, he found that only Grandpa Joe was awake. The other three were all snoring loudly. Shh, whispered Grandpa Joe, and he beckoned Charlie to come closer. Charlie tiptoed over and stood beside the bed. The old man gave Charlie a sly grin, and then he started rummaging under his pillow with one hand. And when the hand came out, there was an ancient leather purse clutched to his fingers. Under cover of the bedclothes, the old man opened the purse and tipped it upside down. Out fell a single silver 10-cent piece. It's my secret hoard, he whispered. The others don't know I've got it. And now you and I are going to have one more fling at finding the last ticket. How about it, eh? But you'll have to help me. Are you sure you want to spend your money on that, Grandpa? Charlie whispered. Of course I'm sure, sputtered the old man excitedly. Don't just stand there arguing. I'm just as crazy as you are to find that ticket. Here, take the money and run down the street to the nearest store and buy the first Wonka candy bar you see and bring it straight back to me, and we'll open it together. Charlie took the silver coin and slipped quickly out of the room. In 5 minutes, he was back. Charlie nodded and held out the bar of candy. Wonka's Nutty Crunch Surprise, it said on the wrapper. Good, the old man whispered, sitting up in bed and rubbing his hands. Now come over here, sit close to me, and we'll open it together. Are you ready? Are you ready? Good, said the old man. Now come over here and sit closest to me and we'll open it together. Are you ready? Yes, said Charlie. I'm ready. All right, you tear off the first bit. No, Charlie said. You paid for it. You do it all. The old man's fingers were trembling most terribly as they fumbled with the candy bar. We don't have a hope, really, he whispered, giggling a bit. You do know that, don't you? Yes, Charlie said, I know that. They looked at each other and both started giggling nervously. Mind you, said Grandpa Joe, there is the tiniest chance that there might be one. Don't you agree? Yes, Charlie said. Of course. Why don't you open it, Grandpa? All in good time, my boy, all in good time. Which end do you think I should open up first? That corner, the one furthest from you. Just tear off a tiny bit, but not quite enough for us to see anything. Like that, said the old man. Yes, now a little bit more. You finish it, said Grandpa Joe. I'm too nervous. No, Grandpa, you must do it yourself. Very well, then. Here goes. Tore off the wrapper. They both stared at what lay underneath. It was a bar of candy and nothing more. All at once they both saw the funny side of the whole thing and they burst out into laughter. "What the heck is going on?" cried Grandma Josephine, waking up suddenly. "Nothing," said Grandpa Joe. "You go back to sleep." Chapter 10. The family begins to starve. That's not good. Let's find out what happens. During the next 2 weeks, the weathers turned very cold. First came the snow. It began very suddenly one morning, just as Charlie Bucket was getting dressed for school. Standing by the window, he saw the huge flakes drifting slowly down out of an icy sky, and that was the color of steel. By the evening, it lay 4 feet deep around the tiny house, and Mr. Bucket had to dig a path from the front door to the road. After the snow, there came a freezing gale that blew for days and days without stopping, and oh, how bitter cold it was. Everything that Charlie touched seemed to be made of ice, and each time he stepped outside the door, the wind was like a knife to his cheek. Inside the house, little jets of freezing air came rushing through the sides of the window and under the doors. There was no place to go to escape them. The four old ones lay silent and huddled in their bed, trying to keep the cold out of their bones. The excitement over the golden ticket was long since had been forgotten. Nobody in the family gave it a thought now to anything except the two vital problems they were trying to keep warm and trying to get enough to eat. There is something about very cold weather that gives one an enormous appetite. Most of us find ourselves beginning to crave rich, steaming stews and hot apple pies and all kinds of delicious warm dishes because we are all a great deal luckier than we realize. We usually get what we want, or nearly enough. But Charlie Bucket never got what he wanted because his family couldn't afford it. And as the cold weather went on and on, he became ravenously and desperately hungry. Both bars of candy, the birthday one and the one Grandpa Joe had bought, had long since been nibbled away, and all he got now was the thin, cabbagey meals 3 times a day. Then all at once the meals became even thinner. The reason for this was that the toothpaste factory, the place where Mr. Bucket worked, suddenly went bust and had to close down. Quickly, Mr. Bucket tried to get another job, but he had no luck. In the end, the only way in which to manage to earn a few pennies was by shoveling snow in the streets. But it wasn't enough to buy even a quarter of the food that the 7 people needed. The situation became desperate. Breakfast was a single slice of bread for each person now. Lunch was maybe half a boiled potato. Slowly but surely, everybody in the house began to starve. And every day, little Charlie Bucket trudged through the snow on his way to school would have to pass right by Mr. Willy Wonka's giant chocolate factory. And every day, as he came too near it, he would lift up his small pointed nose high in the air and sniff the wonderful sweet smell of melting chocolate. Sometimes he would stand motionless outside the gates for several minutes on end, taking deep, slow breaths that were as though they were trying to eat the smell itself. This picture of Charlie standing outside the great chocolate factory, sniffing in the air. See? "That child," said Grandpa Joe, poking his head up from under the blanket one icy morning, "that child has got to have more food. It doesn't matter about us. We're too old to bother with. But he's a growing boy. He can't go on like this. He's beginning to look like a skeleton." "What can one do?" murmured Grandma Josephine miserably. "He refused to take any of ours. I hear his mother tried to split her own piece of bread onto his plate at breakfast this morning, but he wouldn't touch it. He made her take it back." "He's a fine little fellow," said Grandpa George. "He deserves better than this. You're beating me up." The cruel weather went on, and every day Charlie Bucket grew thinner and thinner, and his face became frighteningly white and pinched. The skin was drawn so tightly over the cheeks that you could see the shapes of the bone underneath it. It seemed doubtful whether he could go on much longer like this without becoming dangerously ill. And now, very calmly, with that curious wisdom that seems to come so often from small children in times of hardships, he began to make little changes here and there in some things that he did so as to save his strength. In the mornings, he left the house 10 minutes earlier so he could walk slowly to school without ever having to run. He sat quietly in the classroom during recess, resting himself, while the others rushed outdoors to throw snowballs and wrestle in the snow. Everything he did now, he did slowly and carefully to prevent exhaustion. Then one afternoon, walking back home with the icy wind in his face, and incidentally feeling hungrier than he'd ever felt before, his eyes caught suddenly by a piece of paper that was lying in the gutter in the snow. The paper was a greenish color, and there was something vaguely familiar about it. Charlie stepped off the curb and bent down to examine it. Part of it was buried under the snow, but he saw at once what it was. It was a dollar bill. Quickly, he looked around him. Had somebody dropped it? No, that was impossible because of the way it was buried. Several people went hurrying past him on the sidewalk, their chins sunk deep in their collars of their coats, their feet crunching the snow. None of them was searching for any money. None of them was taking the slightest notice of the small boy crouching in the gutter. Then was it his, this dollar? Could he have it? Carefully, Charlie pulled it out from under the snow. It was damp and dirty, but otherwise perfect. A whole dollar. Pat, pat, pat. He held it tightly between his shivering fingers, gazing down at it. It meant one thing to him at that moment, only one thing. It meant food. Automatically, Charlie turned and began moving towards the nearest shop. It was only 10 paces away. It was a newspaper and stationery store, the kinds that sells almost anything, including candy and magazines and newspapers. And what would he do? He whispered quickly to himself. He would buy one luscious bar of candy and eat it all up, every bit of it, right there and there. And the rest of the money he would take straight back home and give to his mother. Stop at chapter 11, the miracle. We'll stop there. Ready? Peekaboo. Say bye. Say bye, Nolly Bear.